On this episode of Living with a Classic, we'll be reassembling the block, getting it ready for the new head gasket, and also seeing why the head gasket failed on my 1975 XJ6. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and consider subscribing. I put new videos every week on some Jaguar and classic car related content, so you can navigate to my channel down below, check out my previous videos, and if you want to see more, hit the subscribe button and bell notification and you won't miss any future videos. So today it's all about getting that block ready. It's been taken apart as far as I'm going to take it apart. I've painted and cleaned everything up, but there are a few things I need to do. I've checked all the studs and inspected them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're all pretty much brand new, which I have checked with the previous owner and the owner before that, and I found out that it's not that long ago that this engine was apart, and that's why all the studs are basically brand new. I checked the studs, they're the correct length, they're all inspected, they're perfectly straight, the threads are fine. There's nothing wrong with them, so I will be reusing them. I will, however, be putting new nuts on them. Here's one of them. I think they look really nice in chrome. And also I will, of course, put new core plugs in. So let's head over to the car right now. We'll have a look at the block, see what has to be done to get all of this back together and ready. Here's the engine block, and what I've done since I removed the head is I removed any ancillaries, I degreased everything, I painted the block, I removed all the core plugs, and I took out any head studs I could. The ones that are still in place, mostly these two, are just stuck pretty bad. I could get them out if I, use some heat down here probably, but I'm gonna leave them. They're in all the way, they're stuck. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not really rusted out, so I'm gonna leave them. But the other ones need to put back in. So what happens when you take head studs out is, down there if you can see, the little hole where the threads are, where the stud's supposed to go in, it just fills up with crud and dirt, possibly water from coolant. So there's no way you can get that stud back in there. But over here, you can see, I've cleaned out the threads and there's no problem getting a stud in there. So I have this one left to do, so I'll set up the camera, I'll show you how I clean up the threads in here. The best way to clean out the threads is to blow it out with some compressed air and then chase it with a tap. The threads is 7/16 UNF, but how do you get a tap down there? This is the way I've done it. So this is a 7/16 UNF tap. The top here is a square head like it normally is, but I've made it into a 6-sided head, 7mm, and it fits into this. It's a 7mm screwdriver, which is really thin. This particular one is usually used to tighten hose clamps that are 7mm. So I got that to fit in there. It's really, really skinny, and it will fit down into that hole. First, I grab some compressed air and blow out any crud. Then I put plenty of oil on the top. Put that down there. And now it's very, very simple to clean out the threads down there. Now I've gone back and forth a few times and I'm all the way in the bottom. So all the threads should be clean now. So I'm just going to unwind it all the way up. Now just have a look at all the dirt that came out of those threads. It is really worthwhile doing it. So now they're all clean and I can put the studs back in. So before I put these studs in the block, let's have a quick discussion about why I think the head gasket failed on this car. I had a theory before, which might still be correct. However, I found a new thing. So my theory before was that some of the head studs were not all the way into the block. We just cleaned out the threads now. So if the previous person who put the head back on did not clean those out and didn't get these all the way down to the block, what will happen is when you put these dome nuts on, since they're not open at the top, they can bottom out. And at least 3 of them were bottom out. I had to put this in my vise and I had to use some gas and heat this up to get these tops of the nuts off because they were just stuck all the way in, basically torqued into the end here. The threads are fine, they're not damaged, but that is one reason. So then you think that you've torqued down your cylinder head, but you have not. You just torqued these into the bottom because these are not all the way in. So that's one reason. The next thing I found is almost even worse. If you know anything about these engines, you know that they have different size head studs depending on where they go around on the block. There are 4 different sizes. You have 2 sets of shorter sizes, and those are already on the car. Those are the front ones and the back ones. I did not remove those. I measured them, they're in the right place. However, of the long ones, there are 2 different lengths. You can see here, if I hold my finger, they're even up here, but you can see there's a small difference. It's about 4 or 5 millimeter difference. And that is what makes the difference between a successful installation and a non-successful installation where the head gasket almost immediately fails. The reason for the different lengths is because of these. These are the lifting hooks. They're held in place by the studs, like so, on top of the head. And then you have the nuts here. These are used to be able to lift the engine out as a complete unit because they are about 4 or 5 millimeters thick. Those studs are 4 or 5 millimeters thick longer to accommodate for this. And now when I put everything back together and I looked at some pictures of what it looked like when I took it apart, I realized that they used the short studs for where they put the lifting brackets, and then they used the long studs in the other places. So this means that anywhere that they used a long head stud where they should not have used a long head stud, they used the normal washer and the normal nut, and it bottomed out before it was basically all the way in. So the head was not torqued correctly. But we're not going to do that this time. So we'll head over to the block and I'll show you where I will put these studs. I will not be able to put them in the exact original location where the lifting hooks are supposed to be, but I'll head on over and I'll show you what I mean. So since I'm not taking out this stud, I need to find out if it was a long or a short one. So I've threaded in a long one there, and I measured the distance from the deck to the top, and the same here. And I figured out that this is a short one, and that's a short one as well. The problem with that is that when I took this head off, this lifting hook was here on the short one, and this one was over here as well. So that is the problem. That's probably why it failed, because then you had long studs here, there are long studs over there. So then those could not tighten down correctly all the way, and that is probably why the head gasket failed. Of course, I can never be 100% sure, but I feel like that's the reason. So what am I going to do? Well, I put the tape in those holes just to show that, or to remind myself that I'm going to put short studs here, short stud there, there, short stud there, and then a short stud back here, but that's pretty obvious because that one's there. Then I'll put the long ones here and here. So I'm going to put my lifting hooks over here and over there. So that should be no problem at all. So I'm going to start threading in all of these studs now, starting with the short ones, and then I'll grab the long ones after that. I will thread them in by hand first, and when they're in all the way as far as I can with my hands, I will use the double nut method just to tighten them down. This is just to make sure that they go in nice and smoothly. I will put a tiny bit of oil on them. Not too much, but just a little bit to make sure that they go in nicely. So I'm starting now with all of the short ones. And this is now the last of the short ones. And here are the 4 longer ones. So I'm going to put them in the exact same way with a little bit of oil on them. And now it's very obvious where they go. As you can see, they go in really easily when you clean up the threads. I also cleaned up the threads on the studs, so they go in really nicely. And now they're all in as tight as I can get by hand. So I'm going to get some 7/16 nuts and tighten them down. So the easiest way to make sure the stud is all the way down is to use the double nut method. So basically you put 2 nuts on here, you tighten them together, and then you use the top one to drive this all the way into the block as far as it will go. I don't really know if there's a specific torque value for it, but they should just be all the way into the bottom. Not too hard so you strip anything out, but they should definitely be tight. Since I live in the land of metric, and many of you guys might as well, it's kind of hard to get a hold of 7/16 things. So what I did, because I'm replacing the acorn nuts or the nice chrome nuts up here anyways, cut 2 of the old ones in half, chased the threads, and made 2 nice little nuts that I can use just to put these back in. So I'll put one of them on pretty far down, put the second one on top. Then you can hold the bottom nut with a wrench, and you can use a socket and a spanner to tighten them together as tight as you can. Then use the socket just on the top one and tighten everything down. And now that's all the way seated in the bottom. I'm going to hold this here still so I don't unthread the stud again. And there we go. So that's one done. Now I just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think about 8 left to do. So I'm going to do those and then I'll show you when I'm done. Now all the studs are back in place and I snugged them down as much as I dared. They're all down in the bottom. They all seem to be even or the height that they should be. The longer ones you can probably tell they're a little bit longer over there and over there, and all the other ones are the same height. So that looks really good. I also cleaned off the top of the block a little bit with some brake clean, a cloth, and a very soft brass brush that's not going to make any scratches or marks. I am going to clean it off a little bit more before I assemble it, but this block is going to sit for a few days while I get the head together. So I took an oily rag and just put some clean oil all over here so I'm not going to get any surface rust. It is the middle of winter here, February. It rains pretty much every single day, so it gets a little humid in here in the workshop. Not extremely, but probably enough to create a tiny bit of surface rust. Or I'm not sure, but I just don't want to take any chances, so I put a little bit of oil on everything. I will clean all that off and clean it thoroughly before I put the head gasket on. But this is a pretty good first step. I also put some oil down there in the cylinders in case I got some brake clean down there. So I'm very happy with that. So next thing is to get the head on, but that will be in the next episode. So that's it for this episode. So in the next couple days will be the final assembly of the head, so I can put that back onto the block. When I've torqued that down, I'll put in those new cord plugs and seal them up, make sure all that's good, and then I can finally put things back like the starter, the alternator, the power steering pump, put the manifolds back on, the carbs, all new hoses, the radiator back in. It's a lot to do, but it's a lot of fun stuff because it means I'm one step closer to driving this car. I really can't wait to get out and drive it. It feels like it's taken a long time, which maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, but I'm very excited to go out and drive this car. If you like this video, please hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Until next time, I'm Adam, and this was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.